it's somewhat of a distraction from what you all should be reporting on. You should be reporting on the lack of diligence for the last 5 years at the FBI on this investigation, and also a lot of the leads that they had that they let go cold and that they have ignored, and the improbable coincidence of the Capitol Police counter surveillance team that went to 2 pipe bomb locations within 15 minutes of getting out of their car that the pipe bomber had visited the night before. If it's like a single person acting singly without coordination among other people, I am very suspect. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him. Finally. We have got the J5 pipe bomber. You can sleep easy at night. Actually, I don't really know that we do. So I thought to myself, I've been doing a lot of research on this to try and come to a conclusion as to whether or not I trust the modern iteration of the FBI on this case. And they tell me that it is a 30-year-old black anarchist Trump supporter who autist who also carried his own personal cell phone around and was caught basically red-handed and then got away with it for 5 years. Anyways, long story short, I was like, well, I have a very firm opinion on this at this point, but I actually know a guy who was monitoring this particular case back when it first happened, and I was like, well, let me just invite him on. So Kyle Seraphin, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, Clint. Great opening. That's exactly right. They got him.
Yeah, they got him. We're safe. Anyways,
he's a pretty stereotypical Trump supporter. You find a lot of autistic black live in mom's basement, literally pulling out a black mom's basement. Trump supporters out there that evade the FBI through the diligent use of their own cell phone, their own vehicle, and apparently pretty distinctive walking characteristics. I've actually got more on this than I should have on this particular story because I almost bought a house in that neighborhood.
Oh, interesting.
And I have a good friend who lives about 6 doors down from this guy.
Whoa. Well, that's interesting.
And my friend's wife said that's not the guy. Just for I'll just put bottom line up front for people. Friend's wife who's seen this guy walking, she said hundreds. I'm going to say thousands. They've been there for about a decade. And apparently this guy walks his dog on a regular basis. This was also cited in the New York Post. So people can go to the New York Post and read the story where they said the guy has unusually short legs, like really short. And someone made a really goofy comment. It sounded like something I would say. Actually, I thought it was kind of funny. The characterization, when you see someone that walks kind of weird, you're like, but it's recognizable. And then you go and you find a picture of this guy and he has unusually short legs. He's like 60% torso, 40% legs. Kind of awkward shape. And my buddy's wife was like, oh yeah, I've seen him walk like literally hundreds of times, maybe thousands. And that's not how he walks when she's seen the pipe bomber footage. So,
well, that's interesting anecdotal dismissal of the case from Kyle Seraphin, from Dan Bongino and Kash Patel. But so I'll just be honest, like my first thought when I saw, so for those that don't remember, the J5 pipe bomber footage that we saw it looks as if it was slowed down, or like they reduced the frame rate of the surveillance footage so that we couldn't really make out his gait. But then when we actually saw the footage that looked like real footage, it had a very feminine gait. Just being honest, like that was my feeling about it. There's nothing conclusive about that. But I'm just curious what your thoughts are, because I know. Steve Baker over at The Blaze has been all over this.
I think it is the biggest scandal of my lifetime. There is a major development in the January 6th pipe bomber investigation. Blaze News has the exclusive. Its lead suspect is at the highest levels of government. And Steve joins me now. This now will implicate so many people at the highest levels. What's your confidence level in this story?
I can give you forensic estimates, the analysis of the hoodied bomber on the evening of November 5th compared to the Gait analysis of this individual in private life and at work. The actual software hit at a 94% accuracy. Then human analysis from the experts in intelligence is much higher. They looked at it and went, my God, that's it. You've got it.
You've been, kind of going to war with Julie Kelly.
Just imagine if they had arrested an Antifa-tied individual in March or April of 2021 for planting these pipe bombs,
Huge.
it would have destroyed the narrative early on. Now, again, I can't confirm that. Hopefully, when we talk later this evening after this press conference, we see the indictment, we'll have more details. However, that would be the political motive of the FBI and Biden's DOJ to bury this and prevent the American people from learning the truth and the president from exonerating him.
And I'm just curious, like where you're at with it. And actually, let's not go there first. Let's start with your background. Obviously, FBI whistleblower, and you were on this case. So please start there.
Sure. Okay. So I worked for the FBI for 6 years. I got thrown out over whistleblower stuff. That was at the exact same time as COVID. So my skepticism for the government is very, very high. I come from an innately skeptic position to begin with. I was also a paramedic. So people lied to me all the time. It's like, hey man, what's going on with you? And my sugar's really high because I ate a sandwich. And I'm like, you ate a sandwich? Really? What about all these wrappers that we see on the countertop? And they're like, oh yeah, I ate all those things too. And you're like, got it. So you just ate like 4,000 calories of sugar. Okay. You lie as the default position. A lot of people do that. So I start from a very skeptical. My buddies used to call me Dr. House when I was in going through paramedic school in the military, because I just think that everybody lies to you. And then it turns out that a lot of people do. And then it turns out if you work for the government, that's also pretty common. So I had a pretty sarcastic post earlier, which I think characterizes where I come from, which is like, you know, COVID was legit and safe and effective, and there were WMNDs, right? And the moon landing's legit, and it was only Lee Harvey Oswald. Like, we can go down the list for the last 50 years of things that we've been lied to about our government, and eventually it comes out, and you're like, that really wasn't either the whole story or even close to the story. Take your pick. Mm-hmm. So I was in the FBI for 6 years. I would say that I kind of stuck out in some ways because I'm not the typical Fed. As you can tell, I'm a little bit chatty. I'm a little bit more sarcastic. I used to not take the job very seriously in the same way. Like, the work part is serious, but I didn't take myself seriously because I did that work. So we'd get these conversations where I'd chat with people. I used to be in outside sales. I used to do like regular jobs. I ran restaurants. I have a very different sort of experience than a lot of my classmates did. So when I went through Quantico,
you're an actual normal person.
I'm like a regular dude in a lot of ways. We'd stood up in the back of the classroom. I'm at the S end of it. So they had us alphabetically and Seraphin in the back. And I remember standing up in the back riser of the classroom, 50 students who are going to be future agents. And everybody was doing like where they came from and like what they did and like what their previous experience was. Everybody was puffing themselves up. Like, you know, I was a SWAT team commander and I was at this, you know, unit for 8 years and that. And I worked the CIA and I was a bureau chief in Colombia and, you know, all these things. And it got to me and I was like, I was a stay-at-home dad with no kids. And I just left my wife to go and be here. And I had a multidisciplinary degree and I came from Oklahoma. So that's where I went to school.
Well,
and then
that's completely counter to the energy that I get from Kash Patel and Dan Bongino, who, by the way, like every time, particularly Kash, but Dan does the same thing, but really Kash is like when he gets, you know, press conference, anytime he's in front of a microphone, a camera, it's just like, what can I say to make myself sound grandiose, and what can I say to save my job? Like, that's.
Can I tell you what it is? I actually have
please.
diagnosed it. I diagnosed it the other day on accident, and once you hear it, you'll never not see it. Pam Bondi does the same thing. So I mentioned it to somebody at the New York Times the other day. They breathe at illogical times in the middle of these things. Okay. And I was trying to figure out what that pattern is, because I'm a pattern recognition guy. I'm like a movie quotes guy. You say something and I'm like, oh, that reminds me of like this scene and whatever. You know, that's how I operate. My brain does that a lot. And he said something that was really funny. He said, the very being of if you attack the very being of our way of life, the other day at the press conference. And I wrote that down. I'm like, I don't even know what that means. I don't think anybody knows what that means.
No.
And it occurred to me that this is like your first and your only shot at the WWE main stage. You're like a low level. You came out of the whatever the feeder leagues are for World Wrestling, and you step up and you get one chance to try to go against like the champ, and you're against Hulkamania, or you're against The Rock, or you're against like whatever, John Cena. And so you're overdoing it, and they all overdo it, but like the pros do it in a way that is lovable, and the not pros, we'll never see them again. They're like, they get slammed down to the ground and like they're just done. They're just like a bit actor. And so that's what they do. They get up there and they're like, and this FBI, which is the most important thing that has ever been done. And you can tell, and let me tell you something, brother. You know, they just do this thing where they're just so hyped up about, can I just fluff up the thing that I've done? And instead of, and I did an analysis on my podcast this morning.
To my friend, Charlie Kirk. Rest now, brother. We have the watch. And I'll see you in Valhalla.
It was Dan Bongino versus Dan Bongino, which is one of my favorite games. It's Dan, the podcast man, versus Deputy Man, the explaining things away man. And the energy level is so different. Podcast Dan was really confident in what he said. In the same way I'm talking to you right now, the way that you're talking, this is your natural tone. And you're naturally a little bit more laid back, and you're naturally a little bit more sort of mellow, and I'm a little bit more high energy. But if you immediately saw me and I was like, I saw the video.
Right.
He killed himself. Like, you'd be like, well, there's something wrong with that guy. Is there a gun to his back? And everything I've seen Bongino do since he's been in the FBI has been sort of like somebody is pointing a gun at him off camera.
Listen, that Jeffrey Epstein story is a big deal. Please do not let that story go. Keep your eye on this. Catherine Rumler, we need to keep the heat on this case, folks. There are a lot of people who are knee deep in the Washington swamp who are not telling you the truth about serious allegations out there that Epstein may have had video and audio of people out there doing things they shouldn't have been doing. And you should be asking yourself the question, how is it that all these people, the CIA director, the Obama fixer, Bill Clinton, all intersected paths with Jeffrey Epstein? Jeffrey Epstein isn't with us anymore, and nobody seems to want to talk about it. Outside of a few entrepreneurial media outlets saying, hey, this is a big deal.
He killed himself. You want me to I've seen the whole file. He killed himself.
It doesn't seem convincing, to the point where even last night, Sean Hannity, who's a friendly interviewer, asked him a question. Hey, didn't you used to say this was like a big conspiracy? And didn't you say it was an inside job? And didn't you make all these big claims? And he was like, I used to get paid for my opinion, and now I get paid for facts. It's like, did you just bullshit us for years? What were you talking about, man?
It's like, did you just admit to being a liar? Like,
right.
overtly?
And the problem is I don't actually believe that version of you. I believe the one who had the energy that was saying things with conviction.
Yep. I know exact same feeling. Rogan always talks about this. The anecdote he uses is it's a strip club DJ. It's like we've got Rebecca on the main stage. Like anybody who gets in the public eye that really isn't supposed to be there puts on an affect that you're like, oh, you're playing a character, the newsman, the 1960s Walter Cronkite.
Yeah, we can all do it. I mean, everyone has a silly radio voice. It's like, and now I'm going to introduce you the most serious thing that I can tell you. Allow me to tickle your brain and twist your fancies. That's you not breathe, how we talk.
Yeah, or you breathe, really, there's pensive pauses, and then you're an NPR or NPR host. Yep. And it's like it doesn't. Like what makes you successful in the podcast arena and myself is like, it's just sincerity. Like that's it. Like that's all you have to be. This is who I am.
If you met me at a barbecue restaurant, which some people have, if you were to run into me at the grocery store, I'm this guy.
Exactly.
And I don't have to change.
No,
I'm high energy. This is the same guy that my wife married, by the way. We had a whole episode before Thanksgiving that I did about being grateful. And I said the thing that I was grateful for was Oakley sunglasses. Because I bought a couple of pairs of Oakley standard issue sunglasses, and I brought them to my wife's apartment the day I met her. And I wasn't there to hang out with her. I was there to hang out with my friends who were friends with her. And she saw me showing my friends the sunglasses with this like high level of enthusiasm and energy. And she was like, that dude is so amped up about sunglasses. Like what a happy, interesting, high energy dude. And so that was interesting to her.
This is how I know you're a Fed, because you love those sunglasses. Anyways.
I do love them.
All right. So
let's do the real thing.
So I just wanted to understand. So you were put on this case specifically like right after the J5 pipe bomb was found?
Let me set it up a little bit. I did 2 years of counterintelligence, which was not fun, and I hated it. And it's considered really serious work for the FBI, but I found it to be atrocious and potentially unconstitutional. And so I did everything I could to get out of there, to the point where I borderline extorted the internal affairs to remove me. I was like, this is violations of federal law and employment law that my boss is involved in, and I don't want to work for her anymore. And they're like, dude, what do you want to do? And I'm like, I want to go where nobody will bother me. I want to go to the lowest rung on the ladder. I want to go to a squad that can't get people to show up at it. And it's called the surveillance team. It was known as Special Operations Group. And all we did was sit in cars, talk on radios, pee in bottles, look through binoculars, take pictures. That's what we did, which is actually really great. It's like hunting.
Right.
But it's, you have to be able to have a mind that can be distracted by a podcast and have your eyes catch visual patterns. Like when the drug dealer's door opens, you're ready to start moving.
Sure.
And so it's long periods of sitting with small periods and bursts of like really frantic, excited stuff, where I drove over 100 miles an hour like every day for a year. On a regular basis, we did wild stuff to catch up with people and do things like that. We called aircraft in on locations to watch things and stuff like that. So there's some fun, but a lot of it is really boring waiting.
Of course.
And nobody wants to do it. It's not what the FBI, like that's not how you get promoted. but I didn't want to get promoted. I just wanted to make sure that I still had a job. Literally had the conversation with my boss. What's your 5-year plan? I don't know. In 6 months, if I'm still doing counterintelligence, I'm going to resign from this job. I won't work at the FBI anymore. So I don't care what get me out. So I went to a low position, low prestige position in the Bureau. And that put me there for a couple of years. While I was there, I was like, well, this place is cool if we make it cool. So we made it a really good team. And this is part of the story because we assembled a really aggressive, forward-leaning, un-bureau-like group of people that were younger, prior military, prior law enforcement, spoke languages. We had an Arabic speaker. We had 2 Spanish translators on the team. We had multiple guys that were tactical backgrounds, infantrymen, Marine Corps, Army, a couple of different federal and state law enforcement. We had awesome drivers, like really, really good, like premier wheelmen. And we did really cool work because of that, because we were willing to do more work than most people were in that job. A lot of times we got retirees who just wanted to go out there and ride out their last 3 years and get their pension. So we were on that team and we got assigned to the person of interest. And if people have read the Loudermilk summary, which I recommend people at least skim through, Barry Loudermilk and Tom Massey and a couple of others put together a summary of J6 pipe bomb 4 years later. It was released in January of 2025, earlier this year. And they named the people of interest that the FBI had identified. And they were the only people of interest ever identified until this arrest that just took place. And by the way, the person of interest they claim was person of interest 1, which is the guy that they arrested, doesn't seem to have any connection. But interestingly enough, the other 2 were right next door to the person that the Blaze identified. So that's pretty wild. Mm-hmm. So we went to an address in Falls Church, Virginia, ostensibly to watch Person of Interest 3. Person of Interest 3 turns out, multiple stories now, Daily Wire, Jelly Kelly, and a couple of others have put it out. Person of Interest 3 was a tall, black male, retired Air Force E9 that also spent about 15 or 20 years in government service. And so he's kind of double dipping at that point. Went from the top enlisted rank in the Air Force and then went into like the GS-14, GS-15 rank of pay grades for a civilian employee. And this guy had a friend come in from out of town, which was person of interest 2. So 3 is the person we were watching because he was connected to 2. 2 apparently, and we've learned all this subsequently, and I've been piecing it together, so I'll give people the kind of collaborated story. Person of interest 2 was an itinerant Christian preacher who did as many as 80 trips overseas per year and made contact with person of interest 3, who he knew from childhood, maybe middle school or high school, hard to say. Hadn't seen in probably close to 50 years. They reconnected over social media and they had a in-person relationship for the first time on January, whatever, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, something like that, before January 6th. The guy came into town, stayed at person of interest 3's house where we were watching, and person of interest 2 proceeded to borrow a Metro card from POI 3, borrowed the Uber account of POI 3, and then stayed at the house of POI 3, which means that there was basically no tangible connection of that guy even being in DC at all. He didn't use his credit card as far as we know. He didn't have a vehicle. He didn't rent anything, no hotel room, so basically this guy is a ghost. And he pops in to POI 3's house. Now, the thing he did was really alerting, which is why the FBI found them. And we were there on January 13, 2021. The pipe bombs were supposedly placed on January 5th. January 13 were like a week later. That's about how long I would think that the FBI takes to get onto a subject.
Right.
Now, POI 2 got out of the metro in DC, stepped off the train, walked out into the metro area, like where you're about to start walking into the world, and took off his red MAGA cap and put on a Elmer Fudd hunting cap with like long ear flaps and a bill, put on sunglasses, and then put on a COVID mask, and then proceeded to beeline directly to the dumpster where the first pipe bomb was found at the RNC behind the Capitol Hill Club, and took pictures of the dumpster on camera. And his story was, which is what the FBI cleared him based on, was that he was taking pictures of objects with numerals, and he had some sort of hard-on for numbers in DC.
So now, his defense was that he's schizophrenic.
His defense was that he likes to take pictures of numbers, and he's writing a book that's going to have numbers and nameplates and things. Okay? Here's the problem of it. The Blaze ran down who this guy is. They know exactly who he is. I know his name. I know his backstory. I'm not going to give it all out here because it's not public. It doesn't need to be. But he never wrote that book that the FBI claimed that he did, and the FBI cleared him. Not only did he take a picture of that dumpster, he then wandered around DC and didn't take pictures of anything else except a congressional boarding house, which is where some congressmen live and a couple of staffers do. And it's one of the places where the pipe bomber sat and took a phone call from the famous videos that we've seen of the pipe bomber moving around. And then after that, he went just before his train left, he went back to the same dumpster and took a picture of the dumpster in the nighttime and caught his train with 3 minutes to spare using this borrowed Metro card, and then went back into Falls Church. And then a week later, my team is watching the door where they're at, or watching the residence. So he took basically like 3 pictures, and all 3 of them were prominent stops for the person in the hoodie, which was person of interest 1. So for people keeping track at home, POI 1 is the hoodie figure. FBI says they got him. Blaze says it was a her. POI 2 is this mysterious guy from out of town. And then POI 3 was the civilian employee who hosted POI 2. And then the crazy thing is that the Blaze, 4 years later, and this was about 30 days ago or 45 days ago, announced that they had a gait match analysis to a Capitol Police officer, a female, who just happened to live next door to person of interest 3, where I had been 4 years prior as an FBI agent. So all of that was completely bizarre. Now, the problem with that is that it implicates the Capitol Police. And that wasn't the only story that implicated the Capitol Police. And if you'll just give me one more little bit of leash here.
Sure.
The second story that Steve Baker released, which is why it is so damning and why I think there was such a firestorm and why we think we have a subject that looks very much like either a Patsy or a Fall Guy or completely made up. The next story they released was that they did video analysis, and they've got this like weaponized autistic guy. I don't think I'm being mean by saying that. His name is Armitage, so that's what he goes by on X. It's Accabat, Accabat. That's his handle. And he's been doing thousands of hours of analysis on the videos. And so he was the one that told the Blaze, look, not only is the frame rate screwed up on the videos the FBI put out and been deliberately downgraded, but they also actually changed the aspect ratio to 4:3 instead of 16:9. Which is interesting. So they're cutting things out, they're narrowing the scope, and they're and then I think Mike Benz highlighted the fact that there are alterations, there are blurs over the face when the face would be shown, so that you can't even enhance it. And so you've got blurring on there. By the way, Dan Bongino pointed this stuff out on his podcast, and I played some of that stuff on mine this morning, pointing out that these things were known, that the FBI had tampered with the evidence they were releasing to the public, theoretically, like, help us find this guy. Meanwhile, also don't help us find this guy because we're going to like screw up the footage we're going to give you. So the crazy thing that this guy, Armitage, was able to do was track the Capitol Police officers who found the bomb. And here's kind of the story for people who don't understand. I think timelines help people.
Sure.
The bombs were placed the night before on January 5th. And the pipe bomber comes into view for the first time with no obvious route of getting there, with no vehicle. And by the way, the complaint that the FBI filed yesterday did not say what that was. And so we have like this person who just pops out of thin air walking to deliver the pipe bombs at 7:34 on January 5th, 2021. Pops in the rough vicinity of the DNC. So the DNC was the first bomb that was placed, but it was the second bomb that was discovered, just for people's awareness, okay? So 7:34, person pops on camera, walks around in the vicinity, the block that exists where the DNC is, and stops at a very specific bush. It's the only bush that was stopped at in this particular way. And the pipe bomber on video, which you can find on Steve Baker's feed, sits down. This is person of interest 1 in the hood. Sits down on the ground, crisscross, applesauce, Indian style, puts the backpack in his or her lap, reaches into the backpack, rummages through it, appears to place something under the bush, fusses with it for a while, and then seems to remove that thing and put it back in the backpack, and for 77 seconds is sitting on the ground at a bush in the dark next to the Congressional Black Caucus Institute, which is what they believe was the original location place for the DNC bomb to go. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Then gets up from that bush, finishes the square around, ends up at the bench where the pipe bomb was eventually found. And we're told the bomb was placed there at that time. Okay. Then that person retraces steps and goes back, ends up disappearing off the camera right where they appeared the first time, goes for 8 minutes off camera, unknown. There's a speculation that potentially was reloading with another pipe bomb, maybe not carrying 2 pipe bombs at the same time. Hard to say, but disappeared from camera. And that at 8:08 appears closer to the RNC, walks by that congressional boarding house, takes a phone call there and or text messages and is like involved in the phone, and then continues on and then drops the pipe bomb at about like 8:18 or something like that, at the dumpster behind the RNC and between the Capitol Hill Club, and then evacs E&E and disappears from any footage, no vehicle leaving. So that's the night before. The first bomb that was found was actually the RNC bomb. That's the one where the guy took the picture of the dumpster. No explanation of this by the FBI in this recent complaint or what the guy was doing. And they basically said he was writing a book about numbers. Believe that if you want. I'll just tell you, if I wanted to find a bomb next to a dumpster and I wanted someone to plant it in the right dumpster, I'd take a picture of it in the day and in the night, and I'd send those pictures off so that the day person knew what the day looked like and the night person knew what the night looked like. That's a pretty good recon if you're going to do it. And the odds of you getting caught doing that is pretty low unless you had a FBI looking for you, which means they actually have competence. Right. So first bomb is found at 12:43 on January the 6th, just before the Capitol breach. And then the next bomb was found at 1:05. The problem is that the officers that were dispatched to find the second bomb, they didn't know if there was a second bomb or where the second bomb is, if we believe the official story. They were just dispatched to look for explosive devices like you'd expect. We found a device, go look for more.
Of course.
Capitol Police had what are called counter surveillance units, or CSUs, and those were 2 officer teams staffed by 2 special agents for the United States Capitol Police, and they had 3 total teams, so 6 officers in pairs. One of those pairs drove lights and sirens, and it turns out they were driving before the call for the bomb went out, lights and sirens, but they went lights and sirens to the Capitol South Metro Station, incidentally enough, the same metro station that Person of Interest 2 had exited and departed from. It might just be a coincidence there. Parked at the metro station, which is not the most logical place to park, and then went on a beeline, of all places, to the exact bush the pipe bomber had been sitting at the night before for 77 seconds. And they walk by, and you can see the video on Steve Baker's Twitter feed. They look underneath the bush as they walk by. Then they go stand behind a light pole, and they kind of go like, wait, isn't that the right place? Shouldn't it be there? We can't hear anything, but we can imagine what the conversation was. And then they go walk past it again, going back the opposite direction from whence they came. And they do a full looky-loo under the bush, like looking all the way to make sure they didn't miss something underneath. And then they go directly to the actual place where the pipe bomb was placed, over at the bench, with no detours, no stops, and no other looks. And they end up finding the bomb they found the bomb in 11 minutes and 7 seconds from the time that they unasked themselves from their vehicles, which might be a record and probably beats all the bomb dogs. If I had to guess, it's pretty impressive work. So we could probably replace the canines with these guys. Now, I'm not done with that crazy story yet, because it gets worse. And this is why this whole story with the black kid who's autistic doesn't make any sense to me. Then we add on, and this is just background knowledge, then we add on that the on-scene commander for the ATF, who was running the bomb squad for the ATF, which was part of the response, was a guy named Ashawn Benedict. 2 years later, he replaced Yogananda Pittman and became the head of the Capitol Police Intelligence Unit, which also ran the counter-surveillance teams that we're talking about. And the guy who actually found the pipe bomb not only got an award for fighting the pipe bomb, but was promoted to a position liaison of Capitol Police to the FBI.
Wow.
Okay, so now we've got that going on. Furthermore, the guy who was working for Tom Massey and running the pipe bomb investigation on behalf of the members of Congress was a guy named Marshall Yates. And in March, he was sent over to the FBI and is now an assistant director of the FBI, which is a position he's wholly unqualified for. And he is the congressional liaison of the FBI, going back to Congress and to the Capitol Police. So you have the congressional investigators now over at the FBI. You have the former ATF bomb guy is now in charge of the squad where Yogananda Pittman used to be in charge. And you have the guy that found the bomb is now the go-between between the FBI and the Capitol Police. Now, they opened up a new investigation under this new House committee, and Massey's on it, and Loudermilk and others are doing it. And the only way they could open it up was with an agreed limit that they would not touch United States Capitol Police, and they wouldn't interview anybody, and they wouldn't actually get anything from them records-wise. They cannot investigate the United States Capitol Police as the requirement of actually getting authorization to do their committee.
Oh my God, man.
So now you know that stuff. Now it's even more fun. The FBI, the Blaze determined that they found that this gal, who just randomly happened to be one of the less than lethal trainers, like the person who teaches people how to use the devices, was firing rubber bullets into the crowd in a way that is actually not consistent with the way you train, but was actually aiming for heads, as they've assessed. Now, I haven't seen it, and I haven't done the use of force to look at it, but I know that you don't fire rubber bullets at heads. You don't fire canisters at heads. They generally skip them off the ground or go after legs.
I've interviewed a lot of J6ers. They are all adamant that
everyone
that's what
said
happened, that they were trying to catalyze a riot.
And that's what you would do. And so they've got testimony, and there's a whole story that you guys can go read about. People can see the name of this woman involved in the less than lethal use, which was in a way that was incompatible with the training. Now, they started looking at her, realized she was 5'7", and then noticed that she had a pronounced what's called right leg drag, which is a very specific sort of thing. She's also a stud athlete. She's a former Temple soccer player, and she had some surgery on the right leg in, I think, 2015. She ran the Boston Marathon at a pretty studly rate, like 8-minute miles or better. So she's an athlete. She's a stud. And she's 5'7", and she has an athletic build. And interestingly enough, this gal was subjected to gait analysis over at OD&I or one of their contractors. And I'm not 100% sure on who that was, but that's the story as it goes. And that was recently retracted by the Blaze. So we'll just be full disclosure. The Blaze retracted it for legal reasons, particularly because the FBI arrested somebody else. And they got a 94% gait match per the story that they have now retracted. And their human analysis said it was higher to like 98, basically a slam dunk. And then this woman, who was working for Capitol Police, who lived next door to POI 3, who I surveilled 4 years prior, 6 months after January 6th, was moved into a position that is roughly a lateral, and maybe even a downgrade at the CIA, doing what's called force protection. So she was like campus security, but she was also part of the broader umbrella of people that would also probably fill in back for security details for the various dignitaries and whatnot. And she apparently applied to the CIA prior to January 6th and then was hired after the fact and was moved over there sometime June, July of 2021. So this made a lot of people ask a lot more questions. And now suddenly I've got the MAGA telling me, and I say that in kind of like air quotes is kind of a silly thing. Suddenly they believe that everything the government tells them because it's our government. And there's no evidence to me that says that's the case.
Oh my God, man. This is so horrific. I
so
mean,
that's just the backstory though. So Clint, and then we get into the story of this kid.
Right.
And the kid, he's 30 years old, so he's not a kid, but I mean, he seems
he looks like he's got the, mentality of a child.
So from friends in the neighborhood, from, people who have been there for 10 years, they said that this guy is clearly developmentally delayed, on the spectrum, or, mentally retarded in the true sense, not the way that we talk about it in politics, but legitimately has like a slowness to him. And the grandmother confirmed as much in a New York Post interview. And so we've got someone that lives legitimately in mom's basement or extra bedroom, whatever, stays with family, is in his 30s, works at a bail bond shop that his dad owns. Apparently dad owns like 27 different bail bond locations around the country and multiple states. And so has a relatively decent sized business. And this guy struggles to do a lot of things, like walks with a very pronounced weird step. People refer to it as a severe gait, which is not the case for the J6 pipe bomber if you look at it. And again, I told you, anecdotally, I was told, like, not the guy. He apparently walks his small Chihuahua down to a 7-Eleven and back, and also walks all around the neighborhood on a regular basis. And he's known for a couple of things. He wears the same shoes all the time. He wears red Crocs and sweat shorts, like little shorts. Okay. And what's crazy is if you go find any of the pictures on the internet, the only one we could find, which do show his legs, he's wearing black Crocs, which must be his dress Crocs because he's at kind of like a nice event. Right. But as you may know about autistic people, they favor things for comfort. He has like ears that he wears around. He wears like some headphones that for sensitive deprivation or for sensitive sort of isolation. Right. And that's not uncommon. And I had a neighbor that was in the kind of the nonverbal range. And
very common.
We can be real sensitive to it. The sad thing is the FBI has a really good history of setting up people that are mentally delayed, slow, or otherwise have some sort of mental deficiency that gives them an opportunity to come in. So my concern on that is very high.
Yeah, no, it's very common. I'll just tell you my read. I mean, obviously I can't prove any of this, but my read is the FBI is getting absolutely pilloried. They come in, there's all these heroic figures, got Bongino, Kash Patel, these guys who have talked about defeating the deep state. They get into these positions of power. And then they don't bring in any of the whistleblowers. They abandon you. They abandon Steve Friend and others. And it's like, all right, well, then we migrate into the summer. And now we're expecting, okay, but at least we're going to get justice with the Epstein case. And then that doesn't happen. And it's handled in such an egregious fashion. And you've got Kash Patel basically going on record on Joe Rogan, the biggest podcast in the world, and contradicting things that he had said just a few years prior. And then Bongino, who's saying, I'm telling you, the Epstein case is a linchpin to everything, and don't you dare let this go. And he's pounding the table. Then he gets in there and he goes, there's no there, and there's no files. And it's just like, and it's a catastrophe. I mean, it's a catastrophe of the highest order for the reputation of the FBI, which, by the way, the FBI already has a reputation that's in the gutter.
But it was in the 30s. Like their approval rating was in the 30s. And by the way, I think they were trying to say that it was better. Patel was out there touting it the other day on national media, and he's like, we came in and it was in the 30s. It's like, dude, it's somewhere between 36 and 42 right now. That's not exactly a win. If you've incrementally done it just by sheer force of character, that's actually not a win because people don't trust the FBI, nor should they at this point. It hasn't earned it. And I'll say that as a former FBI guy who has friends who are still FBI agents.
Right. But it's like, so these guys are supposed to be the heroes that are reforming the FBI, even though I would like to see the FBI abolished. But regardless, I was doing a panel with Kash Patel a little over a year ago called How to Defeat the Deep State. And I was like, holy shit, like this guy's going to be the head of the FBI. This is interesting. Let's see what he does. And he gets in there and it's just like,
but even what you just said there, it's because we actually thought that he understood what the problem was. And he was getting advice from guys like me. I mean, people can go Google my name and NBC. Ryan Riley, of all people, who wrote the first hit piece about me when I went public, is like, these guys have the ear. They're conservatives, but I'm not a Republican. I'm probably like a Christian libertarian sort of at heart, but I'm probably even a little bit more right-leaning than that. I think actually like I'm a little bit more theocratic than most people would be. But at the same time, I don't want to actually impose that on people. But I'm not a GOP guy. I'm not a MAGA guy. Doesn't mean that I don't align with a lot of their instincts, and I don't want my beef with Donald Trump is that he didn't go far enough. It's like, you said you were going to get rid of the IRS and do it with tariffs. Like, let's go, bro. But that means you got to cut like 80% of the government. Yep, like, let's have it. Yeah. So I think you and I are probably politically more aligned than the MAGA types are, but it doesn't mean they're not generally speaking allies. And if Kash Patel said, I understand the problem and we're going to like eliminate the intelligence component, which he did say, I was like, okay, this guy gets it. Yep. I'm behind somebody that wants to destroy parts of the FBI if I can't get the whole thing taken out.
Yeah, well, and am I mistaken, or was he also responsible for doing some sort of fundraising for the suspended FBI whistleblowers?
Man, you want to know how jacked up that is? So he wrote me a check early on. The first thing that we had, my first interaction was him calling me out of the blue. I didn't know who he was. I'd heard the name, but it didn't mean anything to me. And he had gotten my name from Dan Bongino. And he's like, I want to help you out. I have a foundation. We cut checks to people that are in a bad spot, and we want to send you $10,000.
Okay, I was right.
Now, I hadn't had a paycheck since June, and that was in November of 2022. So I sold my house and I moved into my parents' place at 41 years old as a grown man with like 3 kids and a pregnant wife. And like all of that was bad. And so somebody wants to help me out. I'm like, dude, there's got to be people who need it more than me. Like, my kids are going to eat. I have investments. I'm not going to like go broke. And he was like, no, but I know of you and I want to send you the money. So he did. And so I said, can you take care of my buddies instead? And he was like, I'll take care of them as well. Wow. So that sounded great. So we sent $5,000 to Steve Friend, and he spent a total of $25,000 to Garrett O'Boyle. And over a period of 2 years, we did the assessment. He did about $55,000 worth of material support for about 4 or 5 of us. But the problem is during that time, they raised $1.3 million on our name. And $600,000+ of it went into the cost of the foundation, which is basically Clinton Foundation level garbage. Right. I mean, like thanks for $10,000, but like at the end of the day, like strangers who don't know me have sent $5,000 to my friends. We got anonymous donations of $5,000 for the FBI Whistleblower Support Fund we put together on Give, Send, Go. So Kash Patel, with the name and the fundraising and the $1.3 million that they raised, during the year that was all going on in 2023, they pulled in just shy of 1.3 million, and they paid out a total of 45,000 to FBI whistleblowers of any kind. That's not a great look.
No, that's
that's not a greedy thing. That's just an assessment of numbers over numbers, and it's not a high percentage.
That's a very poor conversion rate for any charity.
And we looked at it for all whistleblowers altogether because they did pay out some money. It was a little bit less than $200,000 against that. So the average payout they had was like $3,200 for the number of donations they had. Yeah, it wasn't high.
Yeah, no, that's not good. All right, so
getting back
to my armchair analysis of this. So FBI's reputation is in tatters. Then you have your reporting as well as Steve Baker at the Blaze, and it's like, all right, we think that we may have dead to rights someone who is responsible potentially for planning these pipe bombs, and then migrating over to the CIA after being with the Capitol Police, and it's like, all right, this cold trail has now gotten warm. At least it's not, maybe not, open and shut case, but it's warm. And then 10 days later, they got their guy, and it's an autistic, anarchist, Trump supporting 30-year-old, black dude. It's like,
right. Well, they alibied the CIA gal with puppies.
Yes. Oh, please recap that for me.
In the first ever appearance of the CIA telling the truth and making sure that we didn't have any lies in our life, the CIA gal she had 2 things that were really interesting. Number one, she lawyered up, which is not stupid in general. And she lawyered up with the former general counsel for the Biden DHS department, the Department of Homeland Security. So that's like $1,000 an hour plus attorney you can imagine that she can't afford on her salary.
No, man.
And so you got a deep state lawyer, if we're going to just use those terms, who jumps up and suddenly agrees that he's going to represent her. By the way, he's not a defamation expert or anything, and I don't know what his background was, but he was general counsel for DHS during the Biden years, and suddenly that guy is going to be your lawyer. So somebody put that together. And that's a pretty obvious step if you're going to go out there and start doing cover. And then the second thing is the CIA released a statement saying she wasn't on John Ratcliffe's protective detail. She's just a campus security guard. Well, the funny thing is that when you run out of people who are working on overtime for security details, you go into a different pool. The FBI does it too. So if you're on the director's detail and sometime, let's call it like, I don't know, June, July, August, you run out of overtime because you've worked all the overtime that's allowed for the year. You know what they do? They go into the bigger pool of people who are tactically trained, which means they go into the SWAT teams. Same story at CIA. They go into the people that are trained for protective detail, and they would go into the same group of people that she was working for. So maybe she wasn't expressly listed as being on John Ratcliffe's security detail, but they didn't say that she'd never done that job, right, which was kind of like a claim. So they made this like correction, which was a distinction without much of a difference. And then they said that she couldn't have been the person who did it on January 5th because they had a video of her playing with her puppies, plural, on that at the time that the bombs were being dropped. Now, just a couple of things. One, it's totally impossible to fake metadata on video, as you probably know. Nobody could ever alter timestamps. That's never been done in the history, and certainly our government can't do it.
No, FBI couldn't handle that.
Yeah. So my tongue is clearly in my cheek at that one. And then the second piece of it is that it turns out we actually did the research on this gal before anything went forward, and we know that she didn't have puppies. She had one dog. And she had one dog named Bella, which was a retired greyhound that she got down in Florida. We know the adoption agency. We have pictures of her adopting the dog. We have pictures and times from the Facebook post that came out about it, which were scrubbed from the internet, but we were able to find. And then on top of it, she actually gave a review of the dog walker that they paid, whose spouse was a former intel community person who got vetted by the CIA to be the dog walker for this single dog, which is not very common, by the way. And so you get this dog walker story, and like we have the review from Google Reviews. The Blaze has done an interview with the dog walker and confirmed there's not puppies. There's one like pretty lethargic retired greyhound. And anyone who's ever dealt with like retired greyhounds, they got about 20 minutes worth of sprint and then it's all over for the whole day. And then they just hang out and lounge, which is why they're retired. So this is not someone playing with puppies, plural. This is someone who had one old dog. And that's a hell of a story to try to pitch to debunk something that I think was really conclusive. And we had people in the intel community say we've drone striked people for less conclusive matches.
Right. Dude.
And we have. That's a fact. So.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they've drone struck people for nothing practically, especially lately. But all right. So, yeah, I mean, obviously she's not a domestic terrorist. She was playing with her 12-year-old puppies.
That's right.
All right. So. That's my read of it. That's my read of it. Is that like we have a false flag on our hands? Like this is a false flag that is. I've always read it, and this has been my suspicion. Just all cards on the table. My suspicion has been for years now that the J5 pipe bomb story was essentially Plan B if they couldn't catalyze the riots on J6. That's been my read of it, but I'm curious.
It also did a good job of distracting resources. If you listen to Stephen's son, who was the chief at the time, so he mentioned that they were actually light resources to begin with, and then they had to deploy a bomb containment unit. Their hazardous material team had to go out there and kind of deal with it, and they had other teams on. There was a CIA bomb sniffing team there as well from their force protection capabilities, which is weird because I don't know that they're usually deployed to everything. And the other thing was on that day, we didn't have what was called an NSSE declared, which is a National Special Security Event. And normally January 6th would have been that because you had congressional speeches, you had a presidential speech on the ellipse. And so generally speaking, what you do is you do this kind of all hands on deck. The DHS declares it, Secret Service is the quarterback, and they do this combined command post where all the federal agencies get together, they send a representative, and then everybody wears a Blue Force tracker so we can deconflict rather, who is who. So we've got investigative teams in the field, and you've got your tactical elements in your response, and you got your bomb sniffers and your DOE, making sure that nobody's doing a dirty bomb. And there's all kinds of different assets. And I've worked on probably a dozen of these NSSEs. The inaugurations are always them. The March for Life is one. These are common. State of the Union addresses every year are all NSSEs.
How is it even possible that J6 wasn't that?
It defies credulity that anybody would have gone away with not having that done. And so that's a major screw up, and no one's ever answered it. But I've been asking that question since I was in the Bureau and since I've gotten out of the Bureau. It's really one of the number one questions, because the reason why they do that is it gives you unlimited federal overtime for the local police departments that come in.
Right.
So the feds pick up the bill. So you get unlimited cops that are willing to work because they're all going to get paid. and the departments don't mind staffing because it's not against their billing.
Well,
so it's really like a really, it's a
I'll give you a
simple
logical. I'll give you a logical reason as to why they didn't declare that is because they wanted to be understaffed because they wanted to be overran by the people on J6 because that their plan was to basically create that havoc. I mean, that's my read of it. Tell me if I'm crazy.
Yeah, I don't think that you're wrong. I think it's a totally fair assessment. By the way, that was Dan Bongino's assessment of it before he became the deputy director of the FBI, as was Kash Patel's story, and it was everybody else's story until, quote unquote, our guys got in there and everybody started switching the narrative, which is really dark. Let me kind of just add one more little sort of log onto this fire as people are sitting there trying to assess what they think this thing means. The criminal complaint, which was used to go after Brian Cole Jr., who's been arrested as the pipe bomber per the FBI as of yesterday. The criminal complaint is bizarre. And I went through it long form with another FBI agent, Steve Friend, who you mentioned earlier. The two of us went through and went by it like almost line by line. But it's only about 7 pages long. It's not hard to read. It's very thin on things that I would say are conclusive. As somebody who has done criminal complaints, and by the way, most FBI agents never do very many of these things, like 1 or 2 in their career, because the FBI doesn't go the criminal complaint route to bring people into custody. There's really 2 ways you go about bringing people into custody for an arrest warrant. The more common way the FBI does is what's called grand jury indictments. And people are familiar with the term, but just for folks that are not, because a lot of people have not been arrested, what happens is that your investigative teams, when you have a police officer, they may make an arrest based on probable cause in the moment. Or if you have somebody that has exigent circumstances, maybe they swear out a criminal complaint and then they come and they get you. More often than not, most local law enforcement will arrest you and then they'll write up the complaint and then they'll swear it out in front of a magistrate judge to justify the arrest. The FBI is different because it's long-term investigations, like a pipe bomb case that takes 5 years. So when you do that, you build up a running affidavit of these are the fact patterns of the case. This is the background of the day. These are the things of the evidence that we found. And you take it in front of a grand jury. And the grand jury then gets to hear from you as the investigating agent and the prosecutor who's going to present the case. They ask you questions. You answer the questions to the best of your knowledge. And then if the grand jury has any additional questions, there's a whole panel of regular civilian people that are just impaneled to ask questions. And they'll ask questions directly and you'll answer them to the best of your knowledge. And then you leave the room. And then they do a vote, which the agent never sees. And they decide whether they're going to come back with what's called a true bill, which means there's an indictment, or they give a no bill, which means you didn't have enough and they decide not to indict.
Right.
And when you get the true bill, then you go to a judge's clerk of court and you say, hey, we'd like to do this on an arrest warrant. And they'll be like, oh, the judge doesn't think this is arrest worthy. You're only going to get a summons, which means I send you a notice and say, Clint, you have to appear on this day and you've been indicted for the following crime. And we'll see you there and we're going to come after you for tax fraud or whatever the heck it is they do. Or they go, yeah, this seems like a reason that we'll give you an arrest warrant. So here's your arrest warrant, knock it out. You have the next 14 days to be able to serve it or whatever the time period is. So those are the ways. The criminal complaint involves me writing it up at my desk and I call the judge and I email it over and the judge reads it and goes, okay, do you swear to test that all these things are true? You have enough probable cause to proceed. And then they say yes. And I get an arrest warrant right then.
Right.
So it's an automatic arrest warrant. And they started doing that for the J6 cases, which was not common for the FBI prior to January 6th of 2021. So this is a criminal complaint. I think it's thin. I think that it lacks a lot of the things that would make me feel good about it. The things that are missing, they identified this guy basically, logically enough, based on phone pings, which we were told were corrupted or that they investigated completely. They were on credit card records going back 2 years now to May of 2019. So 2 years from the time, 18 months or whatever it is. Apparently this guy started buying bomb components 18 months, not just before the January 6th thing, but before the election even took place. Unknown why. And he bought them in an order that makes no sense. And he did them spaced out over a period of 15, 16, 18 months. So all of that could be really, really smart, except he used his own credit card, which is illogical. Then he drove his own vehicle into Washington, D.C., which is illogical. And then he carried his own cell phone into D.C. while committing the crime, which is illogical.
Oh, and he got away with it.
Cell phone, and he got away with it for 5 years. So after 5 years, they came up with cell phone pings, credit card receipts, and a license plate reader for his car. And by the way, he's the right height, and that's pretty much it. And the only way they described him is a guy who's 5'6", who wears glasses and lives in a house with his mom.
So they found a 5'6" autistic dude, and they're like, well, we can't have the 5'6" Capitol Police officer lady, so let's just go with them.
Right. What's even weirder, and this is maybe the worst thing, I've had more than one FBI agent, Steve Friend was one of them who said it this morning to me, and he said it to me yesterday as well, but I've had other agents actually who are working the job still say their concern is, and by the way, most people in the Bureau that I've talked to who are liberty-minded, the people you want working that job, they don't buy this. And they're disgusted by it, which is interesting because that's not a good feeling for people that are in the Bureau to have to deal with. But on top of that, Two of them mentioned to me that their belief is that there was, maybe the possibility that you set this guy up for something different. In other words, investigate this guy, find out that he has what's called CSAM, or child sexual abuse material on his computer. And then you just approach mom and kid. It's like, here's the deal. We're going to do a big arrest warrant. We're going to take you down, but we're not going to put you in for child porn. We're actually going to come after you and say you're the pipe bomber. And if you have a choice between being the guy who has kiddie porn on your computer and the guy who dropped the bomb against the government, I'm going to jail for the bomb against the government. At least I'm going in with street cred.
Interesting.
Just saying. And that would be
just to stay alive in prison.
And the way that they actually charge this is very unique, because the way they charge this particular, and there may be more indictments coming later, but as they did it, it was 18 USC 844 Delta and India. One of them was interstate transportation of a device that would be known to be able to do destruction like that. And then the second one was actually like the attempted destruction of a government building through fire or explosion.
Mm-hmm.
No terrorism charge. No ideology charge. They didn't hit him with the National Firearms Act, like possession of a destructive device that was unauthorized, which would be another 10-year felony. So there's a lot harder ways you could have charged this, which makes me wonder, why did we go so light with this particular thing? And they went really light with the proof. It basically, the pings just said that they think that his phone was pinging in the area. There's no proof that he was the one carrying it. They found his license plate reader 24 minutes before the pipe bomber showed up, but they don't claim that they see him getting out of the car and wearing those clothes. And maybe they have that stuff, but there's no indication from the probable cause statement in this complaint that they saw him get out of the car, that they saw where he parked, that they know what he was driving and what he was wearing. And so, that would be a lot closer to a slam dunk. It's like, we got the guy's car, it's got his phone, it parked in this place. The person who came out of the vehicle looked like this, walked around, dropped these bombs, went back, and then we were able to see that the guy went back home to Northern Virginia. And that's not laid out in the PC statement. Now, maybe they have it, but my concern is that they don't. And the reason why I say that is because they've had 5 years to have it, and you don't need such a light, exigent tool to be going after and kicking down the door. And they took this down all wrong. They blocked in the neighbors, which, if you really thought it was an explosive case, are you leaving a 70-year-old man next door who wants to go to a doctor's appointment and tell him he has to stay in his? No, you're telling him, get the hell out and take your wife.
They let people walk right past where the bombs were.
It doesn't make any bit of sense the way they handled it. And we have some complaints that are coming in from like current FBI that were involved in that. They're going to be bringing their concern. One of the ways you could be a whistleblower is alleging a gross public negligence that results in the public's, possible unsafe behavior. And so that looked like a public safety issue.
No shit.
I mean, all the helicopters captured it. Yeah. And so that's crazy. The other problem is this guy also seems really well set up, because the other thing, and I think I shared this with Clayton Morris over on Redacted the other day.
Right.
One of the wild things is, because I have a friend in that neighborhood and I do know what that neighborhood is about, and I almost bought a house that was like literally 100 yards away from where this guy lives. There is a historic road that runs through. It's a Virginia historic road that's been there since the 1700s, and they maintain it under county. Like they mow it every year or something like that, and it's a dirt road that is drivable by a vehicle. And it goes right behind the guy's house. It leaves from a parking lot of a wedding venue that's like not very logical. It goes past another neighborhood through the woods, and it stays under the wood line the entire time. And it goes within, a couple 100 feet or 100 feet or so of this guy's backyard, which you saw them digging in yesterday. And then it drives all the way around the top of the neighborhood, and then ends up coming out on the east side of it onto another dirt road that connects to a hardball road. And you can disappear into the world. So you could have even driven things up there, which makes it much easier if you're going to go like, who buries pipe bombs in the backyard? And if they did, how do you prove that it was his and that nobody else had access to it?
Right. No,
and so this is a problem. If you wanted to go and stage evidence, not saying that they did, and I'm not making that allegation at all, but the possibility of it was something that was brought up to me by other federal investigators who were like, by the way, dude, like that was a very open field. They don't have fences on the backyards. The lot lines are not divided, and they're pretty open, and they back up to a huge sprawling, like multi-100-acre forest that goes from more than one neighborhood and across wood lines. And, there's obviously a drivable road that runs through it that nobody could even see running off the hardball roads.
But then also the narrative is that this guy, he's preparing basically these explosives years before Trump even loses the election. Right. And then
you know what's not in there? They don't have anything. They mentioned that it's homemade black powder, which is the explosive part of the explosive. And they don't mention that at all in the things that he gathered or the materials that he got. So no mention of him buying, like, whether it be charcoal or ammonium or any of the other sort of things that would be required to actually make a black powder device. Well, that is not referenced. And you'd think that'd be the most important part of the explosive, is the part that burns and blows
out. Or like just talk about capacity. Do you think this guy could actually make homemade black powder? Like, I don't.
For whatever it's worth, the most recent thing is that he confessed to it. But the problem with having people who are autistic is that they have a very high probability and a high susceptibility to what's called the read techniques.
That doesn't mean anything to me. That you could get an autistic guy to confess to basically anything. If he's severely developmentally disabled or delayed. Right. That's an easy slam down.
It doesn't hold any water for me either. I think the confession actually is sort of like worse. They should have gotten an attorney in there right away because is it going to hold any water when the guy says it? And they're like, what were you guys doing? Why were you asking someone who is mentally deficient, who everybody who knows him thinks that way?
Well, yeah, but also a mentally deficient dude made a homemade bomb, really? And then he's also a black guy who puts it out in front of the Republican
Congressional Black Caucus. Here's the other question I have. You know what's conspicuously absent there? His Google searches or his book buying where he bought the Anarchist cookbook or he was doing Google searches or DuckDuckGo searches for these things. So how did they figure out that he decided to be able to build this? I had someone, one of the reporters from the major news outlets saying, well, he's kind of like an autistic Ted Kaczynski. And I'm like, Ted Kaczynski was an off the charts genius. He was unbelievably brilliant. He was just a little bit twisted. And if you go back and read his manifestos, they are completely logical. They make perfect sense. And I think they're actually prophetic to the point where I'm kind of upset. I have an Uncle Ted's Cabin t-shirt, like I'm a big fan of what he thought. I think that his way of going about trying to get the change in the world he saw was imperfect and very flawed. And so shame on that. But it doesn't mean the guy was not brilliant. I mean, he was a freaking PhD from MIT or he went to Berkeley or something. So I can't remember the details anymore. But
as a libertarian, there's a large spectrum when it comes to autism. I know a lot of genius autists, and then there's autists that are not capable of doing any of these
the window
things.
lickers.
Yes, and he seems like he's looking the window. He doesn't seem like the Ted Kaczynski level. So the vibe on this is all off, and I really think that they were trying to entrap Trump supporters to basically suppress all populist right-wing energy throughout this country, completely horrify them as to ever getting out. I mean, and this was after the lockdown era where we were a handful of us, me and like 10 other people in San Diego, were out protesting the lockdowns. And then you have a lot of people who are convinced that the election was not legitimate. And then they protest and then they get arrested and thrown in jail for, I think it was 1,000 years combined across all the 100+ people or something like that.
Yeah, what you're talking about is that you basically created a pressure cooker scenario where you have all kinds of pressure being applied inward on a group of people and then the outlet. And so this has been the contention not only of major people on the right, but also of Steve Baker, who was out there and was a journalist on that day. And by the way, got arrested. And if I got to choose whether I believe the journalist who was arrested on January 6th that did nothing violent and the people who run the FBI, I'm going with the journalist almost every time.
Man.
And
of course,
it doesn't matter if it's Steve Baker or if it's Owen Schroyer, or if it's Stephen Horn, who was one of the youngest guys there that got, or JD Rivera. And I've talked to all these guys, and I believe that their story is legit.
Yeah.
We're talking about people that were there that know that it was unjust. And the concern was, and this is Baker's sort of working theory, having spent he's done hundreds of hours, and his team has done thousands of hours of analysis. Their concern is that they were setting up kind of a rope-a-dope scenario where you were getting the right wing beat up and aggressive and giving ground slowly, but while turning up the heat on the sort of scenario. Yeah. So they crashed through barricades, and then they got another barricade where they got pummeled again, and they got pissed off again, and then they went through the next barricade to the point where they eventually go into the Capitol. And his belief is, and I don't think he's wrong in thinking this at least is a plausible explanation, that Yogananda Pittman refused to give the order to evacuate the houses of Congress, specifically because they wanted this mob that was all turned up to 11 to actually interact with members of Congress, whether it be the Senate or the House. Because if you got blood from one senator or one congressperson, the Second Amendment is done, your First Amendment is done, and they were able to basically clap down on the entire country in a way that nobody would have been able to see before.
Yep.
And it looks like they were actually ready to do that. I worked DC for Biden's inauguration. They shut that thing down like it was the Iron Curtain. I mean, it looked like what I imagined Berlin looked like in the 80s.
Yep.
There was fencing everywhere. There were armed guards everywhere. I had to show ID to get through to my office, to the next street over, to everywhere we wanted to go. It was bizarre. I mean, it was like living in a police state. And my wife and I decided to move out of there. And we took the first train smoking out of there. We ended up in Las Cruces, New Mexico, which we bought a house on FaceTime to go to because I wasn't going to live in DC or near DC anymore.
Well, because it looked like a fascist hellhole. I mean,
it was crazy.
It was horrifying. And then when you consider the fact that it looks more and more probable that the catalyst for that insane behavior at the inauguration was an op by our own government. And it's like, all right, now you're looking at a playbook. Now you're looking at an actual playbook to lock this fucking country down.
That's what color revolutions look like. That's your Reichstag fire, and everybody has used those same things. I always call January 6th the American Rorschach test. And if you looked at it and you were like, oh, that was an insurrection where a bunch of people try to take over the government, I'm like, you're a crazy person. I have more guns in this room than were found on people, right? Okay, so like and this is my podcast room. This is even like my gun room. So I'm not trying to be crazy about it. I'm just saying I got a flamethrower within like 10 feet of where I'm sitting right now that I can go grab. So that was crazy to me. But if you also said that like it was a patriotic movement of all people who just like, were peaceful, it's like, no, there were some a-holes that were doing riotous stuff. Of course, like they fought some cops, and whether they were paid instigators or otherwise, it doesn't matter. Some people came there looking for the wrong things, no doubt in my mind.
No doubt.
And that's always the case when you have a big, the bigger the group, the more likely you're going to have one or two dummies in there. So all of that is my sort of sensible middle position. I think if they had gone reasonably against these people and said, look, if you punched a cop, you're going to go to jail. If you broke some things, you're going to get community service the same way anyone else would. And it's all going to be prosecuted in the DC Circuit Court and not in the, in the Superior Court rather than the DC Circuit. So we're not going to charge it federal. We're going to charge it locally. And, that's the end of it. Then nobody would have cared. But you went after grandmas. They immediately overplayed that hand.
Oh, it was worse than that, though. I mean, they also did the J6 hearings where they withheld exonerating evidence and basically just tried to railroad not just Trump, not just his supporters, but basically the entire half of the country that wasn't in lockstep with the Democratic Party.
That's right.
I mean,
they overdid that. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind they overdid that. That was always insane to me. Lastly, and I'll say this as well, the biggest single question that I've had since January 6th, and I had it when I was an FBI agent, and I had it when I was tasked with going and looking for a pipe bomber, and it's never been answered. Tom Massey shares the same question. He had it on an interview with Baker the other day. It's an ongoing question. Nobody's answered it. The guys found a bomb in 11 minutes and 7 seconds from the time they left their seats in the car. Let's just give it to them that they were actually dispatched properly and that they didn't have like jump the gun and try to get moving in advance. Let's just say that. And let's say they were the luckiest guys in the world who have bomb sniffing instincts that are rivaling a German Shepherd. I'll just give them that. Why did you stop? As Massey said, if this place is just riddled with bombs, you can find one in under 12 minutes.
No, that doesn't
then
make sense.
how did we know there were only going to be 2 bombs? Bullshit. And why did the FBI let this become a cold case that it took 5 years before they got this guy? And why were members of Congress not going, you know what, nothing for nothing. I'm not going into that building because there's some a-hole out there who drops pipe bombs around where I work, and I'm not going to go risk it. So find the guy or we're not going to come back to work. Well, nobody ever worried about it again. It was the most terroristic thing that happened on the day. It's indiscriminate. IEDs are, whether you call them WMDs or whatever else, they are a thing that can hurt people that are not individually. This was not a command wire or a command detonated device. This was a timer. So, and I was always told that it wasn't real, by the way. We were told it was inert right away. Like a week later, we're like, hey, was it legit? And they're like, no, it just looked really bomb-like. We go, so it wasn't going to blow up? And they're like, no. And the reason I asked that was, what's our security posture for this surveillance that we're doing? Mm-hmm. How close can we get to this guy? Do we need to maintain some minimum safes? Is this guy going to have an S-vest? Because we didn't know anything about it. And I'm asking all the logical questions for officer safety that you would ask if you're doing close surveillance in a physical way. And we never got anything that made us alerted to it. They were like, look, it was inert. It didn't work. They weren't going to go off. Designed to look bomb-like. That's the end of it. And you go, okay, fine. So how did everybody decide that? Meanwhile, the FBI charged this particular guy, and you heard it in the press conference yesterday if you listened, it is contingent that these bombs were live, viable, which is not a bomb squad expression. It's actually in Loudermilk's report from January. They actually had an FBI bomb tech come to them confidentially, informal conversation without giving away who he was. And he said, without being named, that there are basically 2 ways that they describe a device. One that would function as intended or one that is a hoax. Those are the only 2 ways. So I would say those are either, they're function as intended or inert.
Right.
And it was described as viable. And no one has ever told us what viable is. And the FBI doesn't have a definition of what viable is. And if you go pull the most recently unclassified and shared lab report from the lab division at Quantico that was actually doing the analysis on these bombs, there's 2 of them. They don't use the word viability in them one time. It's 56 something pages. And so People can go to my page on, if they're curious, if you want to go find the documents yourself, go read them. Like they're in my comments from my most recent YouTube. They're going to be in the comments from my most recent Rumble. I just want people to read the documents.
Yeah,
go
please.
search, do a Control F and say viable. Go look for the word unclear in the Loudermilk summary. It is used 14 different times to describe it's unclear why these things happen. And no explanation has ever been given. 14 times in 76 pages or whatever the heck it is.
Holy shit,
So,
man.
Well, there's a lot of questions.
Let me put my lawyer hat on. I'll tell you why I think you create this term of viable is that you're just basically arguing that, well, it was inert, but it could have been turned into something that was live and dangerous. Like that.
Can I say it the way Steve Friend said it to me? It's my favorite.
Yeah, please.
He said it would have been a bomb if it was a bomb.
Right. Well,
that's the entirety of it. If it was a bomb, then it would have been a bomb.
This
but
is
it wasn't.
so bad, man. This is so fucking bad. I can't even believe it. It's so bad. Like, and I'm a conspiracy theorist, I guess, for the most part. But
I would say we deserve better, but I don't think we do. And that's
I guess we don't. And
this country has a small sliver, and I would have told you maybe before that it was 25%, but it might be 15 or 10%. You've got at least a third of this country, bordering on 40%, that will believe anything the government says because they think the government is the solution to all the problems. That's your hard left, right? And your middle left people. And then you've got the people that are squishy conservative types, or they're right leaning, but they don't agree. And so 40% of those people are out there saying, I don't agree with the government, except when it's my people in government.
Exactly.
And so like we're cheering on the tribal team.
Those people drive me crazy.
And that might actually be a 90% sliver. And then there's the 10% of us is like, you need to be able to prove to me because you're not credible.
Right.
And if
because of your track record, not because I'm some lunatic, but because you guys have lied to me my entire life.
You burned my trust. You had trust, but then you destroyed it. You burned it in every institution. The media has burned it. The public health has burned it. Law enforcement has burned it. You guys have all done this. All government institutions burned it. So if you had some credibility with me, I don't have that you don't get the tie goes to the government anymore. We've thrown out the Chevron doctrine, and now we are at the old school. Show me the evidence. Please prove to me that you are worthy of the trust that I'm going to place in you, because I'm not going to give it to you by default.
I'm sorry. I don't believe for a fucking second that you had this bomb was a legitimate threat to the vice president of the United States. And you just gave up on it. Yeah. And then you have 1,000 people who are prosecuted, who like 90+% of them were nonviolent. And you're just like, you're going to fucking go after all of these people relentlessly. But the one guy or girl or whatever, the black autist, who puts two live pipe bombs, he gets away with it for 5 years. And then suddenly you cover up the Epstein case, and then you need a W. And also it looks,
what the worst thing is?
We've nailed it. And then the truth comes out. Sorry, go ahead.
Yesterday was Dan Bongino's birthday.
Oh, and then you also need a birthday gift for the second in command at the FBI. Like, this is just fucking egregious.
I posted this yesterday, and I think this is like the amount of sarcasm that I can generate for what it is. And so it's like one of those things. And people, like, I think some people actually took me at my word, and they were like, yeah, Seraphin's saying the truth here. This is how I operate. My brain is so snarky and sarcastic, and I just feel like we've been so abused. I wrote the following. I'll just read it to you. I said, for the record, I totally and 100% believe that the FBI discovered a pipe bomber from January 5th, 2021 was actually a developmentally delayed autistic black guy who lives at home in his mommy's basement. And that's why it took them 5 years to find him, checks my notes, cell phone pings, a license plate reader, and credit card records. I'm totally on board with that. By the way, the United States counter surveillance teams for the Capitol Police are better than bomb dogs. And freaking while we're at it, let's just go. The moon landing was 100% legit. Oswald shot Kennedy. There were significant WMDs in Iraq in 2021. The CIA always tells us the truth. The Afghan refugees were properly vetted. COVID was a super killer virus. The vaccines were safe and effective. Joe Biden was a fit and vigorous commander-in-chief. Basically, I believe everything the government tells me. I don't question it because I love the lies. I mean, I trust the plan. Sorry about that. There it is. And that's where I'm at right now.
Well, this is a perfect way to end this, because that's exactly the post from you that I had bookmarked that catalyzed me inviting you on the show today. So that's perfect. But look, I got a
sense of humor.
I got to get out of here on this though. You and I have not talked about the attack on Charlie Kirk, and I'm just curious. This is the same organization who's apparently responsible for covering up the Epstein operation as well as the J5 attack, in my opinion, after serious due diligence.
For sure.
I do not trust them at all when it comes to the Tyler Robinson narrative. I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
I'm a little more open on that, and the reason is because of the time frame and because the other agencies involved. First of all, the FBI is not the charging agency. True. So I'm not saying that I'm 100% on board and that it's true, because I don't know and I can't be.
Utah Sheriff's Office, right?
It's the Utah Bureau of Investigation is the actual swearing, and it's done through the county. So the charging document actually reads in a logical and consistent way. Now, if they can back it up, that's the key. They imply that they have certain evidence in there that I haven't seen. Like it does appear that they have video footage of him actually going over the railing and getting into position. I think there was a lot of misnarrative that was done through press conference and some sort of like confusion on the internet where people got the story and they didn't go read the charging document and what the actual claims are. So people will argue against claims that are not legit. I haven't seen the medical examiner's report, but I do know that I also don't know how heavy the 30-06 bullet was. So did it go through the neck? Should it have gone through the net? I don't know. Was it a 90-grain projectile or 140 or a 260? I mean, I don't know anything about that. And I have buddies who are Green Berets who do ballistics for a living, and they're like, unless you know the age of the ammo and what projectile, you can't talk about that stuff definitively. You're just speculating. So I'm not as inclined to think that there was the big cover-up. Now, I do think that there were people involved that have not been charged. I think that's pretty clear. But I think that the conspiracy of the Charlie Kirk thing is less like Israel, fill in the blank, other country was trying to do it, and more likely, if I had to guess, China and Discord servers. And the reason why is I've been watching the work that Steve Baker's been putting out regarding these sim farms. I don't know if you guys saw these, but there was a raid of 5 different sim farms that were in the Northeast. And what they've discovered, and this is something that's coming out of ODNI, I think, may not be ODNI, whatever, one of the intelligence agencies that's over part of DHS, has essentially said that they believe that there's anywhere between 60 and 100 of these things that are out there. And they haven't caught them. They haven't found them. They've been operating for as many as 15 or 20 years in the United States. And they are running sophisticated US-based AI platform bot networks that are invading Reddit and Facebook and all the free platforms you can imagine. And they can actually hold on to personas. They're infinitely patient, and they are happy to groom and radicalize people, because at the end of the day, the Chinese don't need to get an outcome. It doesn't mean Charlie Kirk dies. It's like chaos, people who disagree, movements that are no longer coherent. Those are actually the wins for your Chinese. And so for all the people that kind of look over, having worked counterintelligence and hating it, there is a very, very small but legit threat that comes out of Israel when it comes to what they are doing at the nation state level. We got a pretty good handle on what they do. They're like a frenemy. There are things they do that are friendly to the United States. There are things that are obviously not. And we tolerate far more things than we would from anybody else. But by no means is Israel like our greatest ally. They'd be in the Five Eyes, and they're not. But the real biggest sort of danger threat, because of size, because of the geopolitical influence it has, and also because of the capabilities as a nation state and their massive amount of human beings that are working in it. I think the MSS has like 800,000 plus employees, which is staggering. So the Chinese threat and the ability to do sort of like advanced AI, manipulation in the social media sphere and in people's minds and the grooming there, I actually tend to lean towards the conspiracy is, and it could be any nation state actor. Obviously, Israel has very, very high cyber capabilities as well. But I actually tend to lean towards radicalized people in a Discord chat, the people that were helping the planning, that were doing the recon, that were involved in the encouragement and, setting up whatever the thing was that needed to be done prior to and even after. That actually leans more towards conspiracy than like it couldn't have been Tyler Robinson until proven otherwise. You'd have to tell me that you'd have to show me that the person that wrote that affidavit is somehow compromised and has something to do with the FBI, which is not very likely from what I read. And I actually know a couple of guys in the Salt Lake office who are really, really good people, like people I would leave my kids with no warning, and who did really honorable work. And that's not something I would say about a lot of people I worked with, but there's a small number of them that were there, including, amusingly enough, the one guy who was doing an interview while Kash Patel is live tweeting, "We've got the guy in custody." And then someone came into the interview room and was like, "Hey, by the way, they just announced that this is the guy." And he was like, "Are you shitting me? This is not the guy. I'm about to kick him loose." He was apparently like a guy who was like Jordanian and was a Christian and was a big Charlie Kirk fan. Right. And so the fact that they had a Middle Eastern dude in the interrogation room was enough for Kash Patel to run forward on that.
Oh my God.
All the clownery beside, which there was tons of problems that went on. The biggest issue that I saw with the Charlie Kirk FBI involvement was that there should have never been a Dan Bongino. There should have never been a Kash Patel. It's a classic conflict of interest. Those guys should have recused themselves right away. Like, you can't come on and say, "I'm investigating the murder of my friend." No. You can't do that. There's no law enforcement agency that will ever let you do that.
I'll see you in Valhalla, brother. Yeah, right. I mean, it was nuts.
Tell your Christian buddy that you're going to go to a freaking Viking paradise of war. I do see that there are clearly some questions. I think the issue, and maybe this will help, it's not going to make anybody trust me or agree with me on this one, but I'm not trying to. I just want people to understand they gave out more information than is normal in a traditional homicide investigation. You normally wouldn't get all that stuff. And the reason why they were doing it is theoretically to be able to identify a person during a manhunt. And that would be theoretically the same reason why the FBI should have given out more information than normal in the pipe bomber case, because you had a 5-year manhunt, if you were to believe that they were actually serious, as they kept punching out these garbage videos. Putting out a picture of somebody and kind of like this narrative that was confusing. I know people were like, oh, he assembled the gun and then used it and then disassembled the gun and then jumped and then he like reassembled it and put it out in the woods and all this other stuff. None of those things are actually the way the probable cause statement reads. It actually reads that he assembled the gun maybe on the roof. That's kind of what they imply. They don't actually explicitly say that, by the way. They said he has something down his leg and it's commensurate with a like not enough bend. I read this way too many times. That he did the shot, and then it looks like he just beats feet immediately after that, does like a rapid, hasty, sort of E&E plan, jumps off in a very, very unathletic way, jumps off that roof. And from my eyes, and I've watched it a million times, it does look, even in bad video, that there is a rifle that he is carrying as he jumps off the roof. And then it looks like he probably pitches it in there. Now, are there shady ass...
You and I disagree on that part, but keep going.
We can. And I'm just saying, like, if we watch it enough times, we'll both look at it and I'll go, there it is. And you'll go, I don't see it.
I don't, man.
It's the same thing as my wife and I watching, depending on the day, I'll watch the Michelle Obama videos and I'll decide whether she's a man or a woman. It just depends on like how my eyes are working.
Right.
So, and we don't have to be contentious about that. All I'm going to say is it doesn't hit the point where I go, this is obviously far too many inconsistencies.
Oh, look, no, it's
generally
not,
lines up.
Yeah, it's not as egregious as J5. I'll grant you that. But
and the other thing is we haven't seen all the, if you've looked, they haven't actually, do you know the fact they haven't even held the hearing yet for probable cause? This is the wildest part of the Tyler Robinson thing. They charged him through an information, which is similar to a criminal complaint. And the way that it works in Utah in the state court system is if you charge via information, what happens is you go arrest the guy and you file the information, which is the same thing as a complaint. And then you have a hearing, and it's not an ex parte hearing where it's just a judge or it's the grand jury. It's actually your attorney and the state's attorney get together and they argue whether or not there's probable cause to believe that you did the crime. And then they decide whether or not they're going to hold on to you and whether they could even charge you. And so they haven't even had that hearing because the evidence they've claimed is so voluminous that you haven't seen it and I haven't seen it and every podcaster and YouTuber has not seen it. It just doesn't exist out there. And the attorneys keep kicking the ball down the line because they said there's so many interviews, there's so much physical evidence and so on. So at the end of the day, when that hearing takes place, I would love to chat with you again and see if they convince me or convince you.
Yeah.
But I don't immediately throw it out because of the speed at which they were caught. Look, if this was a 5-year investigation, they came up with what they had there, I'd be like, this is bullshit.
Right.
And that's really it. It's the proximity and the time frame.
Sure.
Because
but
I agree with you.
I could go 2 hours debating this with you, but I have just two quick questions.
Do you believe that we have the proper suspect in custody? Do you believe that Tyler Robinson is in fact the man who killed Charlie Kirk?
Yes.
Do you believe he acted with the help of anyone else?
This investigation is being led by the Utah state authorities because it is a murder investigation. At the same time, we are working with the prosecutors in Utah to make sure we don't screw up their investigation. Because again, the worst outcome would be if the guy that killed Charlie Kirk walks out of a United States courtroom.
Do you believe any foreign government had a role in his assassination?
At this time, the FBI doesn't have credible information to connect any foreign governments to it.
So first off, just a point I want to make, or an idea that I want to have you pondering, is the same thing that you described with, CSAM with the J5 guy and how maybe he's taken a fall because he didn't want to go to prison for that and because that's a kind of a death sentence. And then Tyler Robinson, dating a guy who's furry, once you have that kind of sexual peculiarity.
The text messages between Tyler Robinson and his roommate Lance Twiggs, the reason a lot of people think Tyler didn't do it is because they sound kind of fake. The wording just sounds a little strange. Like, you weren't the one who did it, right? I am. I'm sorry. They go on from there. Why did I do it? Yeah, I had enough of his hatred and so on. Do you have any reason to believe that text exchange was not real between them for whatever reason, potentially even having been orchestrated between the two of them?
Look, I understand the emotion behind this case. Charlie was my friend. He was your friend. He was assassinated in the most brutal way in a public forum. We went out there, the FBI seized the video evidence and put it out to the public immediately. And then this individual was caught in 33 hours. And so I understand that there's so much charged emotion on the other evidence that was collected, the notes that you were talking about, the text message, excuse me. And we present that information to the prosecutors to make the determination based on the evidence we have as to whether or not they were real. I can't stylize or comment on it because it's an ongoing investigation, but I don't believe the prosecutors in the state of Utah would be using any piece of information or evidence that was not credible.
Yes. I just think that it opens up the potential for, not entrapment, but basically converting this guy into some sort of patsy for that purpose. So I think that's one thing I would like you to.
I think it's a totally reasonable point, especially in the fact that I introduced it. And I think that considering that I think it's very reasonable to say that that's a possibility.
Yeah.
The only problem with that is, and the only issue that I continue to come back to is the FBI has not charged this federally. So that means that you'd have to have the state investigators be able to go along with it. But listen, people have gone on state cases from basically a federal investigation before. And I was on the opposite side. I was sitting in your seat right there talking to the New York Times yesterday. And they go, can you really believe that the FBI would set somebody up and do something like, so immoral? And I go, yeah, I was on a case and I offered to be part of the defense witness team. And they ended up not calling me. And the guy got 20 years to life for terrorism.
Yep.
And he was mentally deficient. And we knew it at the time when we were watching him. And they went and they lied. I didn't read the PC statement when they did the arrest, but they lied in the probable cause affidavit, like factually inaccurate statements that I knew for a fact were false. And I didn't know that when they took the guy into custody. And when I found out, I volunteered to the defense. They never subpoenaed me and they didn't even fight it. So it is certainly possible that people who are not otherwise bad people either do not know that they are attesting to a false statement. Like maybe the FBI agent in that case did not know that a terrorism charge when you're 15 years old in Saudi Arabia doesn't constitute an American felony. Maybe they don't know that, but they should, because I think you could probably guess that, and I bet your audience probably guesses that a terrorism charge in Saudi Arabia where they poured acid on your dick for 3 straight years while you were in custody and beat the shit out of you every single day, like you probably realize that like that's a juvenile charge and it doesn't translate into an American felony that keeps you from owning a gun. But they did make that argument in that case. So people do make arguments that I would not expect them to make. So I'll leave that possibility open that somebody could have been leaned on. And again, I want to see more of it. I don't have a hard mindset. I just lean towards the narrative is not incompatible with reality.
Oh, it's not impossible. I'll say that for sure. And then the other, major issue I have with this, and Jack Posobiec was posting about this this morning, and you even described it, is that he takes this rifle that's allegedly down his pant leg. Mm-hmm. We've both shot. You definitely have shot much more than I have. You have this rifle. By the way, his pants are tight. I don't know how you're fucking putting a Mauser.
Yeah, I saw the same thing. I don't know how they came to the decision that was down there, unless it was a barrel and the action was, you can break those things into a barreled action, which would be skinnier. But yeah,
this is the point that I'm getting to. So if you've broken it down to that extent, that means, and maybe you haven't, maybe somehow you've got the actual scope and the rifle barrel and everything down your tight ass pant legs, and you're going upstairs, and then you get up there, you assemble the rifle. That's also, we think we have to assume that if he's walking with it, on his person, but it's not fully assembled, he had to assemble it before firing, obviously. So he would have assembled it on the rooftop, you would think.
Yep.
He doesn't zero. He takes one shot. He doesn't fire fucking more than one bullet. He locks in and he drops from 140 yards, a perfect shot to the neck that's lethal, and he doesn't follow it up with a volley of shots, which is standard practice for any sort of
for the spray and pray killer types.
Yes, exactly.
The non-practice,
because he's not a trained killer. I mean, this is not a trained killer by any account. So, and he's done it without zeroing the rifle after reassembling it, and then he gets away, and then he confesses, and then he turns himself in. And look.
And what we learned was there was evidence, DNA evidence that could be collected and had been collected, including a screwdriver that was found on the rooftop. Also, we went over to the scene in the wooded area where the firearm was discarded, and the firearm had a towel wrapped around it. It's important. And I can report today that the DNA hits from the towel that was wrapped around the firearm and the DNA on the screwdriver are positively processed for the suspect in custody.
Looking at the Tyler Robinson indictment, And we're going to find out that there's nothing about a screwdriver or DNA on a screwdriver.
There's a lot of things that could happen between any of those things. I agree with you. There is a world where I can see a plausible. First of all, if you have the stock separated with like 3 stock screws, and I'm about to do this with one of my 308s, where you swap out the stock, the rifle zero on a rail is not going to be necessarily touched. In fact, it's not going to affect it at all. So yes, you could theoretically do that. But the way to do that would be you'd have to take out your action screws, which is what they're called. You'd pull them from the barreled action. You'd remove the stock. Then you'd have to keep those screws in your pocket and whatever. And again, this is a high stress scenario. So all of that leans against the reality of this being a plausible thing and the guy taking a decent shot.
And it's a first time killer.
Right. So he's going to now dump it down his pants with a long barrel, and he's going to have the rifle scope up under his armpit or whatever the heck it is, so that the skinny barrel goes down the leg, and then he's got the stock either in the backpack or in his, tucked behind his back in the hoodie. Yeah, it's difficult to read that, and I read it. I'm like, okay, fine, maybe they've got way better footage or way better pictures than what I've seen. So I'm open to seeing it. Yeah. I'm also open to seeing that and going, nope, that's total bullshit.
Yeah,
so what's funny is that I've had people go like you defend the government narrative. I'm like, no. I just say that the default position is law enforcement people in Utah that I don't know. I don't just assume that they're lying.
Of course.
I don't give tie goes to the government. But I also don't say that people who are going to lose their career for saying something false, which you would lose your career. That's Giglio, you're done. Once that happens, you'd be out of law enforcement. So the question is like, okay, well, they clearly imply that they have a lot more than what they've shown. I'd love to be able to see it when they do. The judge has said they're going to have cameras in courtroom and it's going to be a fair trial and they're going to do a great defense. And we're seeing the defense team take their time. If it looks like a put-up job, if it looks like this evidence does not add up to what they're claiming, I'll be the first guy to join with you. Yep, I will 100% do it.
I believe that. I think,
and I don't have any emotion in it either. I don't really care. Here's the weird thing. I wasn't a huge Charlie Kirk fan because he wasn't representing the Kyle Seraphin clan of people.
Sure.
My wife is much less flashy. My life is much less, visible and all the things that we do. But what I saw was, and this was the story that I couldn't get away from. It's it's a 30-something-year-old father who's not raising his children. For me, I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. That's horribly atrocious. I want to see justice. And
Same.
If it turns out
that's enough to go to war over, as far as I'm concerned.
If there's a nation involved, then the nation should pay. If there was a government agency that's part of it, then they should be disbanded. But they probably should have been disbanded anyway, if we're being honest. And then the question is do we have any justice? And I'm sad to say this. I told my audience this maybe 2 weeks ago. We were going to see this month, at the end of this year, by the end of this year, whether or not we were going to have a country that was going to be looked in the face, have a government bald-faced lie while we knew they were lying, while we'd already had the prep of the COVID's nonsense and the lockdowns and the you must be 6 feet away and a paper mask saves you even though you can still smell a fart through it and all the other things that were out there. And we were supposed to go, and I was like, after you've been prepped for all of the lies, we're going to decide whether they can lie to our face, and a lot of people are going to take it. And sadly, you and I are in the smaller camp of people who are like, I default to you are not telling me the truth because you keep lying to me.
Yeah, no, I'm not so sure how much in the minority we are at this point. If ratings are any indication, I think a shit ton of people are waking up. Yes, I'll grant you, we're still in the minority, but I'm just saying, I used to feel like I was in the 5%, and now I feel like I'm in the 15 or 20.
That's probably true.
Where people are
so look, it may be a growing. Maybe that's the optimistic thing of it. I'm a pessimist by nature because I'm very rarely disappointed. If you go out there and assume the worst, it's not like you're going to be like, oh, a nice thing happened. Grr. It's just like a bad thing happened. That's what I expect. And so I live in that space. But maybe we're in the 20%.
I think we are. But I got to make one other point. So you're saying you lean towards it being China, and we're going to end here. I swear to God.
Sure.
You lean towards it, and I'll grant you, in terms of creating chaos, dismantling the populist right wing movement, and just really creating chaos in the country, certainly it would be advantageous to China. But then you have to take into consideration that the guy that they took out 48 hours before that said he was abandoning the pro-Israel cause. So if you're going to say that there's a potential for foreign state, intelligence involvement at any level, that's the first place I would look. Just being honest.
I think people have a confirmation bias on that, and that's just because. And I don't care about Israel one way or another. I honestly, I think we should spend zero money on Israel. My sort of rule is I have the rule of bacon, and the rule of bacon is if you don't eat bacon, you're not my people. And so I just don't care what happens in the Muslim countries, and I don't care what happens in a Jewish country. At the end of the day, the United States government has taken on a position that they can sell a shit ton of things to Israel. They can take a bunch of Israeli money back that comes. It's U.S. money that's coming in through Israel, whether people know it or not. This is U.S. money that goes there. They're not generating it. And then it comes back in through Israeli sources for the most part. So people always act like Israel is controlling America. I think parts of America are controlling Israel, which then go back to control America. That's my nuanced take on this.
It's reciprocal for sure.
Right. I think that the narrow scope of what I'm talking about for conspiracies involve the online portion of it. So if it is an online thing and there are people that are radicalizing in a Discord chat and that are going out there and sowing this discord, I'm not confident that a 48-hour prior statement equals a well-planned op that puts a fill-in-the-blank hit team that sets up a perfect Patsy and all those things.
I got to make one correction there, though, because he says that 48 hours prior, but he's facing a gauntlet of pressure for years prior, and it really ramps up after the Orlando TPUSA event where Dave Smith and Josh Hammer, and he's got Megyn Kelly and Tucker Carlson, and he says go Max, and they do all this shit. That's when all of the Google search shit starts to tick up, and then you have this 2-month ramp up period. And I'm just saying he's under severe pressure because he's unwilling to distance himself from Israel critics. Then he says I'm hemorrhaging Israeli donors as a consequence of this, and basically they're living up to all these stereotypes. And then 48 hours before his life is taken, he says I have to abandon the pro-Israel cause. And then according to Candace Owens, the day before he's assassinated, he says these people are going to kill me. I still haven't got confirmation on that one, so set that one aside. But I'm just saying, it's not 48 hours before. It's 48 hours before that he's basically saying, like, I'm out.
I've reached the limit.
But yeah, sure. But he's facing immense pressure 2 months prior, and that, my friend, is enough time to set up one of these operations.
Yeah, that would be. At the end of the day, I'm not strong on this because this is not my issue, and it never has been. And it's like people. I've been called a Zionist shill by certain people, and then I've been called like an anti-Semite by the other people, and so I feel like I'm okay in the world there. I don't give a shit about Israel at all, and it occupies basically almost no percentage of Kyle's conscious energy or interest. I don't have to answer to anybody. I don't really care what happens. And I really don't. If they were like, the Iranians tactically nuked Israel, I'd be like, well, they kind of had that coming, didn't they? And if they go like, the Israelis tactically nuke Iran, and I'm like, well, they kind of had that coming, didn't they? Whatever. So like, it really wouldn't affect me, not at all. I would go back and I'd pour myself a cup of coffee and I would go on with my life. And that sounds seriously callous. But when I say that my politics are kind of like America only, I actually mean it to the point where I actually am almost woefully ignorant about some of the geopolitics because I do not care. And that Orlando event, I'm not aware of it. It doesn't matter. I'm sure you're right about this stuff. I'm sure you're right about the growing piece there because I know you follow it and I've seen your feed, so that pops in. There are people that care about this far more than me. I'm all about de-weaponizing the FBI. If Israel's behind it, you'll get my blessing. I'll be 100% behind it. Like, pull all the money.
No,
but,
I don't.
But I'm already on the pull all the money from Israel.
Of course.
I already don't want to spend any money.
And that's kind of Tim Pool's defense of his position on this stuff too. And I just to kind of encapsulate why I do care is that we are not separate from Israel. That we do give them billions of dollars, that we do fight a lot of wars on their behalf, that they do have immense influence over our politicians. So the reason I care about Israel is not because I care about Israel. It's because I care about America. About the and you cannot care about America and just ignore what is a tremendous amount of foreign influence in our country. And the foreign influence doesn't start and end there. There's foreign influence from a lot of nations. So anyways, I'll get off my high horse.
There are plenty of my friends that would 100% say that is the place and that's the hill to die on. I have friends that say that to me and I don't feel like, oh, you're trying to drive me somewhere. So you're well within the category of folks that I talk to on a daily basis that say the same thing. And I'm like, yeah, okay, got it. I just am like really narrowly focused because there's things that I know about. And I also accept my limitations as a human being, which is that if you want to talk ballistics, I'm like a 5 out of 10 on ballistics. I'm better than people who know nothing, and I've shot plenty of guns, but I'm not like a guy who does PRS matches every day. Right. If you want to talk about what the FBI does wrong, I'm borderline expert scholarly on that only because like that's the thing that's going to end up killing me and my family as I see it. So I've been looking into that thread like really, really aggressively. Right. If you want to talk to me about virology, I'm worse than the average COVID virologist. I just didn't get there. And I definitely didn't get there on the stuff with Israel, although I don't think you guys are wrong about the influence. I hate all the foreign influence.
Yep.
And so anyway, so I won't be surprised to find out if everybody that's been saying that's correct. I want people to be also aware that money goes all directions. There are people that put money into Israel that have liens on Israel, and Israel has liens on other countries. It's not just the U.S. They take a bunch of money from China, as I understand it as well. So we're talking about like one of the messiest game that's out there.
It's very fucking complex, and I don't like the simplistic. Anything that goes bad, Israel did it. That's stupid. But I also don't like it when people go, this is not possible. And, it's like, it's definitely fucking possible. Sorry.
There are definitely things that are not possible. This is not one of the things that falls outside of the worthy skepticism. So I have no beef with that. And I've never had any problem with that. I think it's weird when people start talking about things that don't make sense to me. And like, I don't follow the story, but I've watched some of the Candace Owens posts, and maybe I'm just getting it from Nate Milk. And I'm just like, okay, got it. I don't know what the Egyptian planes are. I'll have people in my comments are like, but comment about the planes. I'm like, dude, I don't even know what planes you're talking about. I heard they were drones. I heard there was an exploding microphone. Guys, like, how about you just wait until the facts come out on that one? And listen, unless you think that you're in active danger, this is really where that came down to. If you think there's a hot pursuit manhunt where somebody else is in active danger from whatever happened in Utah, then I want that argument to be made so I can also be worried about the active danger. I thought there should have been an argument made that there was active danger about a guy who dropped pipe bombs. Even the FBI said that he had 6 tubes. He dropped 2 of them, and then apparently just did like the walk-off home run. He was like, 2, I'm out. 5 years evaded the FBI, a Super Bowl win or home run in the middle of the World Series, game over. And you start and go like, wait a minute. This was theoretically an active threat. If you told me that the threat is over there, then I'm kind of like, okay, well, let's see what happens in the court. I don't have a ton of faith in our legal system, unfortunately, because I'm in it right now. Someone sued me about something that's completely illogical. I got sued over free speech, I think. I made a pretty sarcastic comment about Cash Patel. Do you know this?
Yeah. His
I've
girlfriend.
been sued by the FBI director's girlfriend by the same law firm that cut me the check when Cash Patel first talked to me.
Oh my God. Well, you get to give them their money back.
Do you want to know? Yeah, I am. I mean, and more. Right now, just paying the attorney. The craziest thing about all that is that I got invited to their fucking Christmas party because I've been invited to their Christmas party ever since they gave me money. So for 4 years, I've been invited to their Christmas party. Last year, I helped them find a $50,000 donor. They gave out $50,000 to a law enforcement charity on my recommendation. And this year, their attorneys are trying to take $5 million, which I don't have $5 million. So good luck with that, guys.
Fucking
like, I rent this house.
That's so disappointing.
You can have the podcast set, I guess.
That's so disappointing. Well, I'll just say the reason I think that the Kirk case matters tremendously is because, if it is anything other than just some radical leftist, trans furry lover, then yeah, we are all under threat because Charlie Kirk was taken out as basically a political commentator and a political organizer. Mm-hmm. And you and I are basically in that camp. So yeah, it's a real danger. I wasn't friends with him, but I did know him. And there's a lot of, it's vitally important that we do not allow for political assassinations in this country, which regardless of what you believe happened, it was a political assassination. There's no doubt about that. If you allow for the JFK, RFK, MLK, bullshit assassinations stories to basically persist into this modern era where we have immense technology and capacity to really figure this shit out, then we're in a lot of trouble. So I 100%
agree with that.
I'm just going to hold them to account. I'm going to make fucking sure that Tyler Robinson did it. That's all I'm saying.
I think that is more than fair. And I think the big thing too, this is what I always wonder, because my dad lived through that time. He was a journalist during that time, covered things like the Patty Hearst trial, went to Sirhan's sentencing, things like that. And so there was a real tumultuous time in America where it did feel kind of like a Wild West. And we have that potential of dropping into that space. And I think a lot of people feel that danger, especially because there's more targets and there's more openness. And
just a year and a half ago, Trump had his fucking head grazed by a bullet. Right. We're on the precipice here.
We are definitely, and I think that the assassination of Charlie Kirk definitely opened a door to some really dark things. So no question about it. So this is kind of where I teeter. This, like I said, I haven't landed that I think one thing or another per se, other than I haven't ruled out the government narrative in so much as it's plausible to me as much as anything else is.
Sure.
Where I land is this. There's the possibility that people have taken something that they've never seen in their lifetime. Like you and I have not lived through a time when there were political assassinations like MLK and JFK and RFK and take your pick, right? That didn't happen in our lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
And the reaction to that happening, like that's what happens in history books. That doesn't happen in like my reading of Yahoo News or my podcast sphere. The fact that people could react to that really aggressively and go off the edge of like, that means all these other things, which may or may not be the case. there's a the sort of an end of the spectrum there, and on the same side, the other side could be like, yeah, the government is completely lying to us, and all that shit is real. So that's as equally, like, I don't know if they're equally plausible, but they are the ends of the spectrum. It's the same way I looked at the Epstein files, which I'm conflicted about as well. It goes like this: the spectrum is there was a one-time pedophile who used to groom girls, and he did shady things, and he got a sweetheart deal from the government because he was really rich. And so we've proven that there's this like two-tiered system of justice, and there's this dirtbag who's able to get away with like hurting post-pubescent girls that are underage. That's one end of the spectrum. And the other end of it is that our government is lying about everything, that they're all blackmailed by like very nefarious forces, including pedophilic, demons, and that they're not only willing to do like have like tons of money, but they're actually compromised all of like the national intelligence through international means of child pedophilic control. That's the other end of the spectrum. Yep. I'm somewhere closer to the right side of the spectrum, generally speaking, on that. Yep. I'm like, it's plausible because people are evil as hell. And we keep seeing that. Our world is full of so much evil. So I think the spectrum of the Charlie Kirk thing is that same. I kind of look at it and I go like, okay, well, where am I today on that spectrum based on the available information?
Oh, yeah.
I look forward to their probable cause hearing. Look forward to chat with you again.
Oh, dude, and absolutely. As soon as that court case starts, we're gonna. I want
to read court documents, and I will, because I started reading it, and I started with the blasting of like, these guys should not have been involved, and like, again, I got friends that did the interviews on some of those things, and their interviews were just clearing people left and right.
Yep.
And so
I'm so locked in on this case. I may fucking travel out to Utah and see if I can get a press pass, because like I am really locked in on this case. It is a big deal to me because I'm probably small time enough, hopefully, knock on wood, that I'm safe. But I've got a lot of friends that I'm very nervous about. So I want to make fucking certain that we got the right guy here, or people here. So anyways,
yeah, and I'm conflicted that they haven't added anything to it because they've had enough time to. That's the other story.
There's no fucking way
they have done the exploitation. The priority was high. The fact that we haven't heard more about what this conspiracy would have looked like. Again, I think it was more likely like online grooming than not. That's kind of where I land. Yeah. Whoever was involved with it, regardless.
We got to know
why do we not hear anything about that? And do they think they can just memory hole it? Is the question.
Well, and if they are covering up how he got weaponized. That's another problem, because that leads towards intel activity, in my opinion. Anyways, I don't want to keep going. Kyle Seraphin Show, please do check it out. I think that you've done incredible work, and I cannot wait for round 3 with Kyle Seraphin, where we figure out if we're in a civil war or not.
I think we're already in the Civil War. I think that's pretty clear. It's just a question of whether it's hot or not. So
exactly. Well, let's hope it stays cold. Anyways, anything else you'd like to tell the audience before we get out?
No, thanks for having me on. It's always good to talk to you. It's nice to hear a reasonable voice that doesn't necessarily believe everything that I say, and we can disagree politely. America used to do that, so let's do that too.
In honor of Charlie Kirk, let's keep doing that. All right, guys. Please do hit the like button, subscribe, leave a comment down below, and continue to share the show. If you're watching on Spotify right now, we are crushing over there. Make sure you subscribe, and love you guys. Peace.
Subscribe to Liberty Lockdown. Great podcast. Clint is tight.